Welcome to the world of culture pop with Steve Mason and Sue Kalinsky. Culture, comedy, movies, TV, tech, authors, trends, pop. This is the Culture Pop Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 36 of the Culture Pop Podcast. Sue Kalinsky is here. Sue, how you doing?
I'm good.
Podcast proudly brought to you by the law offices of Jacob Imrani. We thank Jacob for his support. We missed you last week.
I know. It was kind of like Velshi without rule.
A very strange MSNBC reference.
Well, they're partners, and sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not. So it's
we know your political persuasion from that reference.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But, you know, it's kind of like you kind of came out with a solo album for 2 weeks.
It was. And it was a hit, but not the same.
No.
My favorite show on TV these days is Better Call Saul, the Breaking Bad prequel starring Bob Odenkirk and Ray Seahorn and Jonathan Banks and Giancarlo Esposito. And our guest is Patrick Fabian, who plays Howard Hamlin from the firm of Hamlin McGill. Patrick, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you bet. Anytime.
So, given that the Better Call Saul is so interconnected with Breaking Bad, I'm assuming you watched that show, right?
I did watch the show, and I've told the story before. I did not watch it before I got the job, though. When Breaking Bad first hit the airwaves, my wife was pregnant with our first child, probably about 8 or 9 months. And I remember watching the pilot with her, and the pilot ends of Breaking Bad, and my wife, rubbing, the miracle of life in her womb, turns to me and says, "Yeah, I'm not on board with this one."
That is totally
the stages of having the baby. We didn't watch Breaking Bad, and then we had a second baby, and it's crazy. I saw the billboards. I was aware of it because I'm in the business, but I managed not to watch a single episode. I did manage to watch all 175 episodes of Clifford the Big Red Dog and Super Y, though. So if you want to talk about that, I'm very well versed.
That is totally part of TV now, right? You've got to. It has to be okayed by the spouse. I'm in the same situation, and there are certain shows you watch the pilot, and my partner says, "Nah, not for me. Not going to happen."
Have the ones that you can do together, and the ones that you sort of do by yourself. And God forbid you're doing it together, and you go ahead a couple of episodes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you feel like you're cheating on your mate.
It does. It's funny. It kind of feels like you are. You're just like, ooh, I'm ahead on Downton Abbey. What's going to happen later on when my wife comes home?
Well, it's kind of funny if you kind of go ahead and you say, you start talking about future episodes, and then they look at you like, hey, wait a minute, how did you know that? You get caught.
Sue, that's just picking a fight, isn't it? That's all that's doing.
So when did you eventually watch it, and what place in history do you think, in television history, does Breaking Bad occupy?
Well, I got the audition for Howard Hamlin, and of course his name wasn't his name then. It was just these sort of blind sides. And the casting directors who do it are also the people who cast, it's Sharon Bialy and Sherry Thomas. They also do The Walking Dead. And I hadn't seen them in a long time, and I'm working stiff, so I thought, well, this is good to see them again, because I knew that Better Call Saul was going to be, it was a high priority job for a lot of people. And I thought, well, Breaking Bad had won all these Emmys, they're going to get a movie star, they're going to get whoever they want. So I was going in for the audition to be like, well, maybe I can get like a 3-episode arc on season 5 of The Walking Dead and get eaten by a zombie. So my goals were very low going in. As it turned out, I got the job. And I was thrilled. And at that point, my wife and I sat up, kind of like junkies, and binged Breaking Bad in about 3 days. And of course, then I got nervous, right? I think had I watched the whole thing, I may have been a little more nervous going into the audition. Who knows? But I think I was a little more loose because I was aiming for The Walking Dead. So after I watched it all in one setting, of course, it blew me away that I got to be a part of this family, And my first day that I got to work and I saw Jonathan Banks, I walked up to him because Mike had just gotten killed.
Yeah.
For me, I just watched it like 4 days previously. And I walk up to him and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. They shot Mike. And he goes, I know. Worst day of my life.
That is a great Mike impression.
Thank you.
So you play Howard Hamlin from Hamlin McGill, who's kind of this slick, manipulative attorney. You're great on this show. How do you capture that sort of slickness as an actor?
First of all, it's funny. People do identify him as like slick and sort of like harsh and all this sort of thing. I just think of Howard as somebody who's just trying to run a business. And it's not him who's the problem. It's all these McGill brothers who are creating Mishigosh in his finely toned world. But I tell you what, in terms of the practical thing of performing it, one, these scripts are fantastic. I've been working for a very long time. And these writers really present characters to you that are fully fleshed out. They give you such great things to play, both in the words and in between, in the silences. Second of all, I've got these great suits that I get to wear. And our wardrobe designer, Jennifer Bryan, has these beautiful suits that I get to wear that I think they probably pay more in salary to the suits and clothing than they do to me, frankly. And I put those on, and I feel like I just feel like a badass. So when I enter those scenes, I always feel like I'm the biggest swinging dick, pardon my language, in the room. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the head of a law firm wants to be. And then they couple me with a bunch of great actors. I mean, I'm playing tennis with these pros, McKean and Ray Seahorn, oh my gosh, and Bob Odenkirk. So I'm in those scenes with those people with these words, and they're shooting us like that. Honestly, it would be amazing if I couldn't make it work. You know what I mean? They stack the deck in my favor so well.
It's interesting how you talk about the wardrobe, because I remember when I first saw your character, you have those different colored collars that are kind of rounded, and then you have that bar that goes across the top. And, the first thing I think of, what a douche.
Right. Oh, no, absolutely. What a tight ass, right? I mean, who wears a tie bar? And it's a knit tie. It's a knit tie and a double Windsor with a tie bar. God forbid he gets loose about anything, right? So that lends itself as an actor to sort of do stuff. It keeps you in a good posture. It informs, the way you go through the world. And I think from that first time I put the suit on and I sat there in the room and I sat there at the office at the head of the table, and Jimmy comes in the very beginning and does that whole take on network speech, attention must be paid and all that stuff. And I immediately from that moment felt a sense of ownership, which I think really helps. I mean, that's just good collective working all the way around between the writing, the wardrobing, and the shooting. How
well did you know Bob Odenkirk before you got the gig?
Not at all. I mean, I knew of him, obviously, from Mr. Show. I knew that he was a writer. I knew that he had worked on Saturday Night Live, but I had never crossed paths with him whatsoever. And, of course, I had just watched him play Saul Goodman on my binging of Breaking Bad. But, what was great about him was right out of the gates, I get a call after I got the job from Bob. Just a welcome call. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the cast. We're going to have a great time. These are great people. And, from the word go, he made it into a family, which has been really wonderful and welcoming. It's not always the case. It's a tough business. You guys know, any job that you're on or doing or whatever, the collection of people can either, gel or not gel. And the simple act of calling and saying welcome to the family really went a long way.
I think of this as, kind of an origins story, like in the superhero terms, right? You go, you see the movie Joker. It's about how he becomes the Joker. This is how Jimmy McGill becomes Saul Goodman. And there's this sort of careful, slowly processing kind of development. And you, Howard, plays a huge role in that, right?
Well, I do, and because in theory, Jimmy was going to work in the mailroom at HHM. He would matriculate up, and eventually he would join his brother on the wall. Hamlin, McGill, and McGill, I'm sure is what he thought it was going to be. And quite possibly Howard also thought it might be, given the pedigree that Chuck McGill has and the reliance that HHM has on him. But of course, things go awry for various reasons right out of the gates, and Howard's put in the bad position of having to be the bad guy, the Darth Vader, against Jimmy, until we discover, of course, that it's actually Chuck who's doing the machinations, which, and then after Chuck is gone, Howard is there to sort of, try to make peace with Jimmy. And who knows, maybe help him out again. And he does. He gets him the Schweikert-Coakley job and all that. But it's funny, as much as I think of Howard as being a benevolent character for Jimmy, reaching his hand out, trying to be fatherly, trying to make up for past transgressions. Jimmy's character, as he evolves into Saul, of course, does not want that hand. And Howard ends up representing a whole lot of what Jimmy hated in the first place, I think.
Chuck McGill, who's played by the great Michael McKean, it's such a complex character because he is a jerk to his brother, but he's also got this, he's allergic to electricity, and so you feel sorry for him and really hate him at the same time. To me, that's a product of just great writing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, the fact that they came up with this thing, and the writers' room really is this cauldron of ideas, and they really fact check stuff like this. They, the whole what if he had a disease? What if it was this? What if this is thing? And is it real or is it not real? Do doctors really treat it? But is it psychosomatic? But in the hands of any less of in my mind, a genius actor like Michael McKean, that whole thing falls apart. I mean, it's such a predominant storyline. It's such a linchpin of his existence that if the actor is not capable of making that real, I think the whole season falls apart and the show runs right off the rails. But because Michael McKean was so committed and so good in it, as you pointed out, as much as we loathed Chuck's actions, and we didn't really want him to have to, he's not somebody you want to invite over for dinner, there was sympathy. We had sympathy for him. Like maybe he was acting like that because of this. And it's weird. The audience had to sort of filter their feelings out about Chuck. And I think we all were sort of, when Chuck burned to death, all of us were like, the audience and the characters in the show don't know how to deal with it because we're ambivalent about our feelings about it. We're conflicted.
So Jimmy is another one of these guys. First of all, the season 1, if you go back to the early part of the series, I mean, there's this sympathetic, he's almost like a wounded child, right? You feel protective for him. And now he's slowly developing into this kind of malevolent force. Did you have the sense that Bob Odenkirk had that in him all along?
Oh, I think it's fair to say, Bob would even say he wasn't sure he had it in him. I mean, that was the big question, right? This is a guy from doing Mr. Show all of a sudden plays Saul Goodman on Breaking Bad. But of course, on Breaking Bad, he was sort of strangely the comic relief in a very dark show. He was sort of like that moment where we could breathe a little bit. But nonetheless, let's keep in mind, we meet Saul in Breaking Bad. The first thing he says is, kill Badger. Wasn't me, kill this guy. And you forget that because we're watching Jimmy and we're like, oh, we feel bad for him and we. But he becomes the guy who, without hesitation, says, kill the guy beside me first. And so I think Bob was unsure how that was going to go trajectory-wise. But what's great about watching him, talk about great number one on the call sheet, he delivers, man. He's committed, and he's committed to rehearsing. He's committed to the words. He's committed to making sure it's the best that he makes sure that he's the best that he can be, and therefore all of us want to rise to that occasion as well. What's really great about working with him and Ray and Michael is as soon as we get our scripts, we get together with one another and we start writing lines. We start talking about scenes. We run lines with each other. It's kind of like being away at summer theater camp in a way. We're in Albuquerque together and we'll just get together and run scenes with one another. So by the time we get to set, we at least have established some ideas, some rapport, some choices, and run down some paths, so that whoever's directing has some choices to manipulate us. So we're ready to go. We're sort of, we've done our homework, and Bob leads the way with that. So it's amazing to stand by and watch him do that.
The interesting thing about a prequel is that certain characters aren't going to make the cut because they weren't in Breaking Bad. How far in advance do you know the plot lines as an actor?
Oh, none. When the script gets delivered to me. So it unfolds as it comes out for me. Maybe Bob, I'm sure Bob maybe has some conversations, but also he's said he's tried to, because he's a writer, the last thing a writer's room was once one more writer's opinion, right? So he's tried his very much to keep his acting hat on and be just Saul in this show. So he also is sort of blind about what's coming up. And I think the writers also weren't sure. Part of the genius of Breaking Bad is they also would put their characters in sort of impossible positions and then find creative but realistic ways of getting them out of them. And I don't think Better Call Saul is unlike that at all. So I don't know what's in store or how it's coming down. And everyone is, everyone's wondering how Kim Wexler's going to die or how Howard Hamlin's going to die. just because we're not seen in Breaking Bad doesn't mean we have a demise. As somebody pointed out, we only ever saw Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad when he was at work. We never saw him when he went home. So where does he go home to? Yeah. Who does he go home to? So these are unanswered questions, and these guys have sort of these guys and girls in the writers' room have turned it in so far. I don't expect that they won't coming up.
Yeah, the show, it's so fragmented with worlds of people's lives that don't collide. That's such an interesting part of the show to me, is that sometimes it feels like it's three different shows in a way. And they're
but they're going to wind up overlapping.
Yeah, I think of your character, and it's like, well, do you kind of cut off Giancarlo Esposito, or like how would you actually collide with him?
Yeah, I it's funny because I read the scripts, right, obviously, and I see what's going on, but the show for me over the past 5 seasons, literally, I'm in a show about lawyers that have some emotional problems, and then I watch it on Monday nights, and I'm like, what is all this shit going down in the desert? Look at all these criminals in my show. You know what I mean? Because I really don't interact with any of them. Although I have always thought that maybe Giancarlo and I would cross paths because he's a businessman. We're both suit types, and it feels like we would cross paths in some sort of community function at some point. As of now, that has not happened. And to that point, we got picked up for season 4, and I called Jonathan Banks. And I'm like, hey, I said, we got picked up for season 4. Isn't this great? I said, you know what? I really, really hope I get to have a scene with you. And without hesitation, he goes, no, you don't, Patrick. You don't want a scene with me. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, I don't want to cross Mike Emertrout in this place because it'll be the last scene I have.
Now, were there certain actors like you met them at a cast party, because you didn't have any kind of contact with them during the season?
Oh yeah, that's totally the weird thing. We'll cross each other in hair and makeup a lot when we get in the makeup trailer if we're doing split days and that sort of thing. But there have been people absolutely where I haven't seen him until the end of the season, and I'm like, oh hi, Lydia. I was like, oh hi, I've seen you in Breaking Bad, I've seen you in all these shows, but I've never seen you at all in person. So there is a fragmentation to it that is odd. But again, we also like to visit each other on set a lot too when other people are doing other work. So I'll drive out to the desert when they're doing stuff and check out what Michael Mando's up to. Jonathan Banks, it seems like he's got a lot of work at night in the desert, in the cold. And so we'll put on parkas and hot chocolate and go out and support him for a few minutes at least,
Bob Odenkirk has described this season, without telling us anything, has described this season as a descent into darkness. How fair is that?
Oh, absolutely. And I know we said before, like they've been pushing this rock up the hill, and the rock has now been pushed over the top, and it's rolling freeform, and there's no controlling it. And from the places that we got set up last year in season 4, things do get dark. As you pointed out earlier, how did he go from this guy that was sort of a sad sack that we're all sympathetic to become sort of, this, he becomes amoral. He becomes completely cut off from the behavior that you would imagine normal human beings. And so the fact that he still has tethers of affection with Kim and other people, in the first 2 episodes, we've already seen him really descend into Sauldom with skirt bending the truth, bending the law, crossing the line. And he does it with glee and aplomb, and he's good at it. And he likes being good at it. And I think the audience likes him being good at it, too. That's why we liked him when we saw him in Breaking Bad. But now that we've seen where he's come from and we see what he can lose, I think it makes it very bittersweet for the audience to watch him, put on the garish suits and really start, used car salesmaning it. So,
Patrick, you're from Pittsburgh. I spent a lot of time there and was actually originally from Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Horseshoe Curve.
Horseshoe Curve. Do you still have the Pittsburgh accent? Did you have to lose the Pittsburgh accent?
You know what? I was born in Pittsburgh, spent the first couple of years of my life there, and then we moved to South Central PA into Harrisburg. So all the yuns and all that stuff sort of went away from me. However, I'm a diehard Steelers fan, and I'll go to my grave with the memory of like Franco Harris and Terry Bradshaw and Mijo Grebe posters on my wall. There's no doubt about that.
So you went to Penn State. I was a big Penn State football fan in those days. I think you and I are about the same age, so we were fans of Penn State, I'm assuming, during the Joe Paterno era, the glory days. How do you feel about that era now?
Well, it's. I graduated in '87 when we beat Miami for the championship. Last time we held the trophy aloft, and I would run into Joe Paterno in north part of campus. He'd be walking his dogs, or he'd be walking to class. They'd walk into the stadium, and I'd be walking to class. And my interactions with him, every time I saw Jopa, of course, we had an ownership of him, right? We're like Jopa and stuff like that. He would stop, and each and every time he would steer the conversation right back to you. He would say, "What are you studying?" "Oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, I know somebody over in the theater department. Yeah, is Carol still teaching?" And I'm like, yeah. "But what about this weekend's game against Syracuse?" "Oh, I think we're ready. We're getting the boys as ready as much as we can." "So where are you living at?" "Oh, those dorms over there. You know what used to be there." And he would engage in a very personable way. So that's my personal experience with him. But what went on there was unconscionable. And institutional failure and a personal failure across the boards, and you can't give those kids their lives back. And so it is weird to root and to talk about Happy Valley and do all that with that knowledge. But I also think you can't paint the entire experience as being just that as well. So it's a very as we live and grow in this day and age about accountability and speaking up and giving voice to the voiceless. I think there's a way to go ahead and hold people accountable and still be able to say, I love Penn State, and I had a great time when I was there.
So did you always know you wanted to be an actor?
Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been playing music and being on stage since I was like in 4th, 5th grade. I originally wanted to be a lead trombonist in the pit band of a Broadway musical. I was telling my folks I was just going to move to New York after high school, which, of course, as you can imagine, pleased them to no end. But in the end, I went to college and I said I wanted to be an actor. And of course, they were like, "Oh, good, one rank above musician," and I think they thought I was going to find something else to do. 18-year-old boy probably was going to change his mind. But as it turned out, I found my family right out of the gates. I love telling stories. I love being on stage. I love the group effort of theater, of film, of the whole 9 yards. And I've been very fortunate along the way to get some breaks here and there. And, Better Call Saul being obviously one of the biggest, but of course, ironically, it happens, deep into middle age, deep into a career of just being a working stiff and sort of being like, "Oh, I know you. Don't I know you? Didn't I go to high school with you?" It's like, no, I was on Xena. No, I was on Star Trek. No, I was on Friends. No, I was on CSI. So, I'll take the sunshine while it's here for Saul, and then I'll probably be right back in line, in a couple of years with all my friends who I've come up with.
Well, I mean, you're not deep into middle age. You and I are the same age. I don't consider us to be deep into middle age yet, are we?
Well, okay, if you're going to go that way, I'll go that way too. That sounds fair.
When did you first think, is Saul the first time you thought, I made it?
No, I think when somebody asked me at one point, I realized for 10 years I'd been paying my rent as an actor, as a freelance artist in a business that does not reward freelance or any of that stuff. You know what I mean? And I had not become I hadn't become famous. I hadn't run a series. And, I was in my 30s when I realized, but you know what? I've been doing this for a decade, and this is what I do, and this is how I do it, and I've been able to afford doing it, and I'm really lucky because of that. So in terms of made it, that was a good sort of moment to be like, oh, even if it's just this is great. I'm getting to do what I love, and I get paid for it, and it takes me sort of all over the country and all over the world in sort of interesting ways. Saul's the first time that I've really had something that I get stopped a lot, and people call me by my character name all the time. It's Howard. People, I'm in New York City. I was in New York City for something. And I was in Central Park, and I was just walking, and some guy with his headphones on is jogging through Central Park, and he sees me, and he points at me, and he goes, "Hey, Howard!" And I look at him, I give him a wave, and he goes, "You get off Kim's back, you hear me?" I give him another wave. And he pulls his headphones down. Mind you, he's not stopping running, and he goes, I said, get off her back. Did you hear me? And I said, okay. And I sort of laughed, and other people around him sort of recognized, but it was New York, so they also didn't care. And I sort of smiled, and I just thought, you're doing good, Fabian. That's not too bad.
Absolutely.
You get yelled out on the street in New York, you know?
Well, listen, season 5 of Better Call Saul is underway now on AMC. Can't wait to see through this season. And it's picked up. Next season's supposed to be the last one, right?
It is definitely the last one, which I think is great. It's one because we know there's an end. We knew there was going to be an end, but there's no lingering now. Now we know it's going to be driving to something. And, I have no doubt that the hands that I've been put in so far with this writing team, and Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould, are going to deliver something really spectacular for our finales.
Cool. Patrick, Fabian, really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Mason, Sue, thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Yep, you too.
Accident or injury, call Jacob and Ronnie. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mace. If you or a loved one is injured in any kind of accident, please don't wait. Call Jacob immediately for a free consultation. That's right, free. When an accident happens, it can turn your world upside down, so put the best on your side. Jacob doesn't even get paid unless you win. First name, first thought, first call, Jacob, Jacob, Jacob. After an accident, 24 hours a day, call 844-24-JACOB or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Cool guy, Patrick Fabian.
Very cool.
Yeah. His character is, he didn't acknowledge, but very, very slick. And to me, vaguely sleazy, I would say.
Totally.
Yeah. The show is so good. The show is so good. Sue, you're trying to play catch up right now, right?
I know. Well, so what happened was I've been watching it on Netflix because I catch up on everything on Netflix.
Of course, yeah.
I got a full-time job now.
I know. Right? I hear you.
So I started...
I've had one the whole time, but continue.
Yeah, but it's different hours than I have.
Yeah.
You know, I get up at 6:30 and I'm gone. I get home at like 9:30, 10 o'clock.
It's a terrible,
I got a big TV job,
burden
Steve.
for you. Terrible burden.
So anyway, I thought that I was catching up by watching season 4. So when I talked to you yesterday, I said, how many episodes? I think it's only a couple episodes I missed. And you were like, yep, just 2. So I'm watching and, I get to the second episode and I'm like, okay, great. I can go to bed now. And then all of a sudden it said next episode. I'm like, oh my God. And then it kept on going. I was like, wrong season.
Yeah. We're in season 5 now.
I know. So you
have so much trouble prepping for this podcast.
No, I do. I have to own this.
Yeah, you really do.
It's the electronic thing. Just everything that can go wrong went wrong.
Right.
Trying to watch movies.
Since we got a minute here, are you afraid of the coronavirus?
I am a little bit afraid of the coronavirus.
Are you?
Yes, I'm a little bit.
I'm not.
Because now
doesn't scare me.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't scare me. I'm going to Guatemala in 2 weeks. I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to go through the international terminal, get on a plane, go to Guatemala. I'm not afraid.
And you're going to drink Corona beer.
Yeah, by the way, that's this. We are leading the league in stupid right now as a country. 38% of Americans believe they can get the coronavirus from drinking Corona beer. Oh, God.
Oh,
God help us.
Yeah, true.
God help us. All right, there you have it. There is your Culture Pop podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you again to the law offices of Jacob and Ronnie. Don't forget, subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.
Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next week for an all-new episode of Culture Pop.